I've just realised that you can see my elf on the top of the tree. Don't worry, we do look after him. He's okay. It's just, yeah, I think my mum knitted him for me, and he just sort of hangs out at the top of the tree every year. So yeah, he's okay. What is up, everyone? Fish Shop Matt here. Happy New Year, I suppose. It's, I don't know, really early on in January. If you're watching this at a later date, it's obviously not Happy New Year. But, New Year, first video, all of that stuff. This year is going to be the year that I'm going to try and make more content. The channel's grown amazingly and everything's really fun and you guys are amazing and yeah, it's all really cool. So, going to try and make more content this year. Got a few ideas, got a few different things I want to try out. This is one of them. Loads of you message me on Instagram, hundreds, and I can't keep up with you all. I would love to message each one of you back individually, chatting to you about your issues, problems, questions, but I'll be honest, I receive hundreds, and obviously what with home and work and trying to make videos and everything like that, I just don't have the time. It really, yeah, annoys me that I can't, but maybe in the future there'll be a way that I can possibly work on doing it, but I thought the ones that stick out as a question, I could answer in a video once every, I don't know, depends how many questions you've got. After this video, I really hope you guys don't bombard me with like thousands of questions. But I thought, yeah, we can make some videos. We can do a Q&A essentially once in a while, every 3 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever. So I've gone through my Instagram messages, had a look at all the different ones, and I've pulled out a few that I think are interesting and a good question. So let's do a Q&A. So I got my phone, we've got Instagram messages on here now. I'm going to scroll through, find some of the ones that I think are interesting, click on them and let's answer them. Let's go through it. So, question number 1, we got this one. So, hey Matt, love your content. Just wondered how I tell the difference between male and female plecos. Would like to try and breed them in the future. Tricky question, if I'm honest. So, with plecos, it depends what you mean by a pleco. Now, a pleco could be a true pleco, which is the big, horrible thing. They're not horrible, they're lovely, but they grow too big for most people's aquariums, which is a plecostomus. Those, they're an absolute nightmare to breed. I don't know even if they can breed in captivity. They're not a species I really pay much attention to because they just get big, so very few aquariums that can house them sensibly. But if you're after or thinking of one of the other smaller, what they name plecos, which are suckermouth catfish, then there's loads of different ways of telling, to be honest. If it's something simple like a bristlenose catfish, obviously the males are going to have that bushy beard, all the bristles on the front of their face. Females are going to not have that. Then having a look at some of the other species, so you can have a look at sizing. Females will normally be a little bit more plump. Males will be a little bit more slender. What else have you got? Yeah, it does depend on the species. Obviously, you'll know who you are with the message because that's pretty much word for word what you've written. If you see this, if you watch this, message me what species they are and we'll go through it a bit more in depth. But yeah, you could find it would be, like I say, females are a little bit more plump, males are a little bit skinnier. You can get, well, essentially the males on some species will have what they call like odontodes, which is like essentially hairs on their pectoral fins. So you'll find that the males will be a little bit more hairy, a bit like a bristlenose, but just in different areas. So you'll get them behind the cheeks, you'll get them on the pectoral fins. Yeah, there's loads of different ways of telling. It's probably worth just Googling the species that you've got, or like I say, send me a message, again, with what species you've got, and I'll try and go through it. So I'm scrolling down through. Question number 2. Really simple one. Let's just do this one. I'll probably answer this one several times because everyone always asks me, hey, Fish Shop Matt, where is your shop? I need to come and visit. So I work in a Maidenhead Aquatics down in the southwest of England. As you've possibly seen on MD Fish Tanks videos, we are called Maidenhead Aquatics at Taunton. We're closer to a town called Wellington, but yeah, we are Maidenhead Aquatics at Taunton. We are just off the M5, so we're not very far from the motorway. But yeah, if you look for Maidenhead Aquatics at Taunton, I'll put a little banner thing down here. That's where you'll find me. I do work there full time, but obviously I do have days off, so yeah, it's a bit random when I'm there. But yeah, that's where we are, Maidenhead Aquatics, Taunton. Question 3. Let's go with this one. So this one's a bigger problem, and I'll be honest, this one's probably a video that I'll do when I get time, I'll do a bigger video on this. But hello, Fish Shop Matt. I wondered if you could help me. My tank is suffering really bad with Blackbeard Algae. How can I combat this? So like I say, this is probably a question that needs a bigger video, if I'm honest. It needs a video that's, a few minutes long. Quite a few minutes long. But the quickest way, in all honesty, is BBA, Blackbeard Algae, normally affects only certain species of plants. A lot of the faster growing plants it won't affect. I would, if it's a quick situation, I would lessen your lighting, up your water changes. What else would you do? Lessen the feeding. That way you're going to have less nutrients going into the tank. You're going to remove more of the nutrients by doing your water changes, and you're not going to be giving the algae a lot of light. The other thing is to plant with some really fast-growing stem plants. Just off the top of my head, hygrophilas and limnophilas and anything stem planty, even a lodia, like, the standard pond weed that most people use. That would be all really good because they will grow, they will rip nutrients out of the water. I suppose floating plants as well would be a good shout. They would float on the surface and again rip nutrients out of the water. We've had a few tanks over the years in the shop that have suffered with it. It's inevitable because in the shop we obviously feed a lot. There's a lot of fish in the tanks. So we do suffer with Blackbeard Algae in the shop every now and again, and that's pretty much the way you get on top of it. Obviously, if you've got lots of live plants in there, you could look at feeding like a liquid carbon. That will help reduce it and will start killing it back if you get on to dosing that fairly regularly. But yeah, really, it's just going to be more maintenance and less feeding. That way you should be able to get on top of the algae. Chop the affected leaves back, so if they're really covered in hair algae, chop them off, let the new leaves come through. Hopefully, fingers crossed, you'll get on top of it. But I will promise to do a bigger video on BBA or Blackbeard Algae at a later date. Hi, Matt. Hello. What's the best way of attaching plants to bogwood or rock? I always struggle and they always float away. It is a pain, I'll be honest. Like, it can be a nightmare for you, or for anyone, to be honest. I've had it a few times where you plant it and it just float off. But I suppose the two main ways that you'll find of attaching it, or most people attach it, one is glue, so any cyanoacrylate glue. The other one is to tie it on with something. So the gluing method is probably the most popular at the moment in the store, I would say. Any cyanoacrylate glue, like I said, will do. A lot of companies do escapers glue, which works really, really well. Or you can get the Gorilla Glue, that's got the green lid on it. Again, depending on which country you're from, it might be different. But yeah, any cyanoacrylate glue works really well for scaping. You can obviously dry off the plant a little bit, so just dab it with a little bit of towel, make sure it's dry, and then as long as your bogwood or rock isn't too wet, it will glue on really quickly and quite easily. If you've got a fully scaped tank and it's wet, it can be trickier. I have done it underwater, but it is much, much harder to get it to stay because you've got to stay there holding it down, and it doesn't always set properly underwater. I found it can be a bit tricky. So I would always say try and do it out of the tank or before you've set up the main tank. With it, if you wanted to, you can glue it to a little pebble. So if you get a little pebble or a rock that you can wedge into the bogwood, you can always glue it to that outside of the aquarium, if it's all running like this, and then put it in. Makes life a little bit easier that way. But yeah, just dry off each side, glue it on, give it a few minutes to sort of set and go off, and then you should be able to put it in. That's the easiest option, I'd say. The other option is obviously tying it. Now, people will use anything from like fishing line or thread or cable ties or zip ties, little clicky things that you pull together. You can then obviously wedge it in, tie it round, and it will stay on there. And then you can always cut that at a later date once the plant is settled after a few weeks. The only issue that I've come up with that is that sometimes you'll find a fish get stuck in there. So you do have to be careful because they'll try and wedge themselves behind the fishing line or behind the thread, and they can get wedged. That's why I like using a cable tie, because it's a bit thicker and normally you don't get any fish sort of trying to get in behind it. It's not like a spider's web of thread that's going to get them caught up. But yeah, they're the two easiest options. Just take your time. Yeah, let it set. If you're using a glue, you should be okay. Scroll through and see where we're at. So we've got this one. So, good evening, Matt. It is evening, you are correct, well done. Love what you and MD do. I've seen in some of your tanks that you use houseplants. Yes, we do. Growing out of the top, which houseplants would you say are the best? That's a tricky question. Well, it's not a tricky question, I suppose. The three main ones that I like using are Monstera, which you can see, which is like the Swiss cheese plant. Again, they have a few different names. You'll find most of your plants like this will root quite readily into water. Pothos, which is devil's ivy, which is, can you see it in the screen? You can't really see it. It's the one that sort of dangles down from the top and goes in and it roots into the aquarium in the corner. That one generally works really, really well. And probably the peace lily. They work really, really well. I've got a tiny little peace lily that's growing up at the moment in here. It was just a side shoot of one of my bigger peace lilies that's in a pot, and I just pulled it off and stuck it in. That being said, there's loads of houseplants that you can use. Most of the time, I just try out cuttings. So if I've got a plant that's growing in the house, I will, take a cutting, pop it in there, see if it roots, to be honest. If it roots, winner, brilliant, great. But if it doesn't, then nothing lost, sort of thing. I did have basil growing in the top of this tank for a while. Weirdly, it done so well. It was growing like really tall, really leafy, and then one day it melted and just, turned to mush. I don't know what happened. The water level didn't change. Nothing really changed, but did just melt. But again, it was just a cutting off of an old piece that I had kicking about. I have seen loads of people use things like sweet potatoes, so they'll stick a sweet potato in and then the vines will grow out from the sweet potato. What else have I seen? I've got a customer actually who's got chili plants growing in there, so he's just bare rooted the chili plants. Essentially, if you have a look at, if you wanted to have a Google, and again, this is a cool video. I think it'll be a good video to do all different house plants. Maybe put a few on trial and test and see if I can get them growing. But you'll find any house plant that can be grown via hydroponics should work in an aquarium. So you can have a look, there's things like lettuces and tomatoes and all sorts of stuff that they'll grow via hydroponics. So have a bit of fun. But if you want some houseplants that are easy, devil's ivy, pothos, monstera, which is this chappy, which, I can't remember the Latin name of that one, but look for Swiss cheese plant on monstera and peace lily. They're probably my three favourite go-to to get growing. Wash the soil off, get them rooting maybe in a vase for a few weeks first, because then, you can do it outside the aquarium, and then, chuck them in and away you go. Hey, Matt. Hello. Hope you and your family are well. We are. Thank you very much. It's been a lovely Christmas and a lovely New Year. Thank you. Would you be able to give me recommendations for a clean-up crew in a 100-litre aquarium? It's going to be nature style with lots of plants and a good amount of hardscape. My go-to three. Bristle noses, they're a really good one. 100 litres. You should be fine when they're fully adult in there, but they are going to get chunky, so you might need to move them out once they're fully grown. But if you get some nice little juveniles, they'll last in there for quite a while. Otocinclus, you can see that. Oh no, that there. That's an Otocinclus. So they're a dwarf suckermouth catfish. Really, really good for getting in amongst the sort of nooks and crannies because they've got a slightly smaller mouth than the bristle noses. And then shrimps, depending on if you're having bigger fish or smaller fish, you might go for the cherry shrimp or any of that sort of group, because you get blue jellies and yellows and Bloody Marys and all of those different types of cherry shrimp. So you could go for those guys, or if you wanted the big bulky ones, which like I've got in here because I've got some big tetras, you go for the Amano shrimps. Those three there are going to cover most of your bases on sort of algae. They're my three favourites. There's very few aquariums that I have that haven't got those three in there. The only other thing is to obviously have a look at things like Corydoras to give the bottom a bit of a stir up, but they're not going to be the same. Like Amano shrimp are going to do a such better job at picking up any uneaten food and any algae. So bristle noses, Otocinclus, dwarf suckermouth catfish, or Amano shrimps or cherry shrimps. They're the three to go for most definitely. So I've been watching the time of how much I've been videoing, and each of these questions and answers is like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So I'm going to probably cut this one off here, give this one the last question that I've just scrolled on to. So, where are we at? Right, okay, here we go. So, there was a message before this as well that makes it sound a little bit, he introduces himself, so it's fine. But this is the second message. So, I'm trying to set up my 36-gallon freshwater tank, but I cannot get the water clear. I've put the clarity stuff in and it won't fix it, and I'm not sure what to do. I was wondering if putting a couple of plants in would help suck it out, but I'm not sure. Okay, so it depends what's causing the cloudiness. So it doesn't say if you've got fish in there or not. No, so how would you tackle this? So it depends what it is. It could be the sand, so it could be the sand and gravel, the dust coming out of that just slowly clouding the water. It could be what they call a bacterial bloom, where there's a food source and the bacteria is working really, really quickly to cloud up the water, or not to cloud up the water, to break down what's in the water, and therefore they're clouding the water. Now, easiest way to fix this, first step for me, would be to take a glass of water out your aquarium, sit it on the side for 5 minutes. If you sit it on the side for 5 minutes, and once the water has stopped moving inside that glass, if it's particles, over the course of 5-10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, everything will settle out. So you'll get a layer of dust, essentially, in the bottom of the glass. That way you know it's particles in the water. If it's bacteria... Sorry, my dog's just woken up. If it's bacteria, what you'll find is the water should stay cloudy for a good amount of time in that glass. It should still look milky because the bacteria shouldn't really settle out that quickly. So that's your first point of call. Find out what you're battling. If you're battling bacteria, in theory, it's either working on the food source that's too much in there, so it could be less feeding, or it could be bacteria, what was I going to say? Feeding, or, giving them more homes. So putting some biological ceramics into the filters, because that way you're providing more homes for the bacteria to live in. So either one of those should help you with the bacteria. That's if the glass stays cloudy. If the glass doesn't stay cloudy and you get that layer of sediment or dust on the bottom of the glass, that is going to be particles. So it's working out where those particles are coming from. Most of the time it's rocks, sand, things like that. Sometimes your sand, if you've got sand in there, it can be too fine, so that can blow up into the tank. But all of this should be able to be removed via the AccuClear or the flocculant, as they call it, the liquid that you put in there. The one thing to make sure with that is if you're dosing the flocculant, make sure your filter's got a fine enough filter in there. That should then catch all the particles and remove them. You might need to change that filter fairly regularly. You might just run it for an hour or two. If you get a big wodge of filter wool, stick that in the filter, put your AccuClear in there, get that water clarifier in there, and then that should, in theory, get rid of it. If it comes back after a few days, there's something in that's causing it, and it's working out what it is, whether there's a catfish digging things up, or whether, I don't know, your soil's made it to the surface, whether you've put a fertiliser tablet in and it's worked its way to the surface and it's breaking down. It's just going to be working out what it is. But in theory, if you use those steps, you should be able to get on top of it and it should settle. There, cool. I'm going to leave it there because I think I've got a lot of questions to go through. I've read through quite a few. I think I'm then up to date. Obviously, Instagram do delete messages after 4 weeks, which I didn't realise, which is annoying. So I know there was some, several weeks ago that were really cool. So get back in contact if you do have questions for me. Just ping me a message on Instagram for the minute. At some point, I'll set up a page or a group, or I don't know what. I'll work something out. I've got to find out what I need to use. But then we'll set it up and we can, do a Q&A. I don't know, every so often. We'll do one often, Hope you've enjoyed it. It's a bit different. It's something I wanted to try for the new year. Normal content will be resumed, hopefully a little bit more frequently now. Got the bowls grown in really well, so we're going to do a video on that. Got some big plans and some big stuff coming, hopefully over the next week or two. So watch out for that, maybe on this channel, but probably on MD's channel as well. As always, I've been your host, Fish Shop Matt. You know how I like it. It's good. I'll see you in the next one.